My name is Eleanor, and I want to tell you a story. It's my story. For a long time, I couldn't even utter these words out loud. But I believe the time has come. It's about a 40-year marriage, a family I built from scratch, and how it all came crashing down in the most unbelievable way. George and I had been married for 40 years. 40 years is a lifetime, isn't it? We raised 2 wonderful children, Bethany and Charles, and were blessed with 2 granddaughters, Julie and Caroline. We had the suburban home, the manicured lawn, the entire dream of a perfect American life. Or so I thought. After George retired from his director position and I left my part-time job at the local public library our lives were supposed to settle down, to ease into that comfortable, golden rhythm of retirement you see in magazines. But life is not a magazine. For the last decade or so, I had been battling severe rheumatoid arthritis. Some days were better than others. On good days, I could tend my garden, attend my book club, and cook George's favorite beef stew. On bad days, just holding a coffee cup felt like grasping a handful of broken glass. The pain was a constant, unwelcome guest in our home. And over time, it had changed the landscape of our marriage. If you're watching this video, please subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. The physical intimacy we once shared had become a casualty of the illness. It was a silent sadness between us, something we acknowledged but rarely spoke of. I thought we had an understanding, a closeness that went beyond that. I thought he, of all people, understood my struggle. George was still healthy, thank goodness. He was a vibrant man, full of energy. He played tennis twice a week, had a standing Friday night card game with his friends, and was always busy with some project in the garage. I was happy for him. Truly, I never wanted my condition to slow him down. But lately, a new kind of distance had crept in. It wasn't just the separate hobbies. It was something in his gaze. He seemed restless, impatient. The signs were small at first, easy to dismiss. He started spending more time on his phone, angling the screen away when I walked into the room. His card nights started ending later and later. Sometimes he would come home smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked, he would simply wave a dismissive hand. "Oh, that's just Tiffany. You know how she hugs everyone." And I let it go. What else could I do? To question it felt like admitting the foundations of our 40-year marriage were cracking. It was easier to pretend not to notice. One Tuesday afternoon, I was preparing for my weekly book club meeting. It was my only real social outing, a small island of normalcy in my sea of chronic pain. I was looking forward to discussing the latest novel with my friends. Just as I reached for my keys, my cell phone vibrated. It was Margaret, the hostess. "Eleanor, I am so terribly sorry," she said, her voice rough. "My grandson came down with a terrible flu. We're going to have to cancel today." I felt a pang of disappointment. "Oh, of course, don't worry a thing. I hope he gets better soon." We hung up, and I stood in the silent hallway, the quiet of the empty house pressing in on me. George thought I would be out for at least 3 more hours. A little idea occurred to me. A quiet, pleasant evening. Perhaps I could surprise him. I could stop by the butcher for some good prime ribeye steaks he loved, and we could have a nice dinner, just the two of us. It seemed like a good plan, a way to bridge that growing distance. I felt a small flicker of hope as I got back into my car and drove toward home, completely oblivious that I was driving straight into the wreckage of my life. The drive home was short, only about 10 minutes. I remember the weather was gorgeous that day. One of those perfect autumn afternoons where the air is crisp and the leaves turn brilliant shades of orange and gold. I pulled into our driveway and noticed an unfamiliar car parked further down the street. It was a small, sporty red convertible, the kind of car a young person would drive. I didn't think much of it. New neighbors had moved in a few houses down. I went in the front door, calling, "George, honey, I'm home early." Silence. That was the first thing that struck me as odd. Usually, the TV would be on in the living room, tuned to some sports channel. But the house was calm. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator. "George?" I called again, a little louder this time. I walked across the foyer and into the living room, and that is when I saw it. The scene is seared into my memory like a photograph. George was standing by the fireplace. He was not alone. A young woman was with him. She couldn't have been more than 30, with long blonde hair and a tight dress. Her back was to me, but his face was clearly visible. His hands were on her waist, and he was leaning in to kiss her. They froze when they heard me. The woman spun around, her eyes wide with a flash of panic. George simply stared at me. There was no surprise on his face, no guilt, only annoyance. Pure, absolute annoyance. As if I was the one who had done something wrong by simply existing in my own home. My purse slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor with a soft thud. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence was deafening. I looked from George to this woman, this stranger in my living room, and back to George. My mind struggled to make sense of what I was seeing. The woman was the first to find her voice. I should go," she stammered, grabbing a small clutch from the armchair. "Yes," I said, my own voice, a husky whisper I didn't recognize. "You should." She hurried past me, avoiding eye contact, and fumbled with the front door before rushing out. I heard the engine of that small red convertible roar, and then fade down the street. And then there were just the two of us. I turned to face my husband of 40 years. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break them. "George," I started, my voice trembling. "Who was that?" He sighed, a heavy, irritated sound, and ran a hand through his hair. He wouldn't even look at me. He walked over to the wet bar and poured himself a glass of brandy. "Her name is Tiffany," he said, still with his back to me. "Tiffany." I repeated the name. It felt strange and ugly in my mouth. "And what was Tiffany doing here, George, in our home?" He finally turned, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. The expression on his face was one I had never seen before. It was cold, defiant. "Oh, come on, Eleanor. Don't play dumb. You know what she was doing here." The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. "I don't know," I managed. My voice choked. "I don't know anything. I come home and find you with another woman, and you expect me to what? Understand?" "Maybe you should," he snapped, his voice rising. "Maybe you should try to understand what it's like for me. You think this is easy, living like this? We're roommates, Eleanor? We haven't been husband and wife in years. Every word was a physical blow. He was using my illness, the pain I endured every day, as an excuse, as a justification to betray me, to bring another woman into the sanctuary of our home, the home I had invested my life in. So this is the solution, I cried, tears now streaming down my face. Instead of talking to me, instead of being my partner, you go out and find her. She makes me feel alive, Eleanor, he yelled. She's fun, she's not tired all the time. She doesn't complain about her aches and pains. The cruelty of it was stunning. I felt a sudden rush of anger that burned the tears away. Get out, I whispered. What? He said. Get out, I repeated, my voice now dangerously quiet. I don't want you in this house tonight. Go to a friend's. Go to Tiffany's. I don't care, but get out of my sight. He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw clenched. I think he expected me to crumble, to beg. He didn't expect this. Without another word, he slammed his glass onto the bar, grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door and left, slamming the door shut behind him. And I was left alone in the wreckage of my 40-year marriage. I sank onto the sofa, the silence of the house screaming in my ears, and finally allowed myself to break. I spent that night in a daze. I didn't sleep. I just wandered from room to room, touching the furniture, the photographs on the walls, memories of a life I suddenly wasn't sure had ever been real. The next morning, George returned. He didn't apologize. He acted as if nothing had happened, making his morning coffee, reading the newspaper. The silence was a weapon, and he wielded it with expert precision. This continued for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of living with a ghost in my own home. We barely spoke. I felt like I was losing my mind. I thought about calling the children, Bethany and Charles. But what would I tell them? Your father is cheating on me. The words felt too shameful to utter. I was paralyzed. Then came the 4th of July. It had always been a big family celebration for us. A huge backyard BBQ with all the children and grandchildren, ending with the town's fireworks display down by the lake. That year, the thought of it filled me with dread. But George insisted, we have to maintain appearances, Eleanor. He had said the one time he had addressed the situation directly. The family started arriving around noon. Bethany and her husband Frank with my granddaughters Julie and Caroline, then Charles and his wife Iris. I put on a brave face, forcing a smile, hugging my granddaughters, but I could feel a strange tension in the air. Everyone seemed to be walking on eggshells around me. After lunch, as I was clearing the table, Bethany came up and placed a hand on my arm. Mom, she said, her voice serious, we all need to talk. In the living room. A cold knot of fear formed in my stomach. I followed her to the living room where everyone was gathered. George was sitting in his favorite armchair, looking grim. The children were arranged on the sofas. It looked set up. It looked like an ambush. I sat down, my hands trembling in my lap. Bethany took a deep breath. Mom, she started, choosing her words carefully. Dad told us what's going on. I stared at her in stunned silence. He had told them. He had framed the narrative, told his version of the story before I had a chance to speak. He told us about Tiffany, she continued, and about your issues. The fact that you two, well, that you can't be a wife to him anymore in that way. The room began to spin. My issues. They were calling my debilitating chronic pain my issues. I looked at George, but he wouldn't meet my gaze. I looked at my son, Charles. He was staring at the floor. "So what is this?" I managed to say. "An intervention? Are you all here to tell me I'm not doing enough for your father?" "No, Mum. Of course not," Bethany said quickly, though her tone was condescending. "We're just saying you have to be realistic. Dad has needs, and if you can't meet them, isn't it better that he finds a discreet way to take care of them, rather than, getting divorced and destroying the family?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked around the room, searching for an ally, a single person who saw the madness of this. "So, you're all okay with this? You think it's acceptable for your father to have an affair?" Bethany sighed. "We're not saying it's okay, Mom. We're just saying it's a practical solution. It doesn't have to affect anyone. He gets what he needs, and the family stays together. It's better for everyone." I turned to my son. "Charles, do you agree with this?" He finally looked up, his face expressionless. "It helps Dad, Mom," he said quietly. "He's been really unhappy." I looked at my daughter-in-law, Iris. She looked profoundly uncomfortable. "As long as it's discreet," she mumbled, wringing her hands. My last hope was my granddaughters. Julie and Caroline, my sweet girls. They were teenagers, part of a different generation. Maybe they would see it. "And you girls?" I asked, my voice pleading. Julie, the oldest, exchanged a glance with her mother, who gave a slight nod. "Well, Grandma," she said haltingly, "a lot of our friends' parents have open relationships. They say it's not a big deal. It's just sex, right?" "It's just sex." The words echoed in the silent room. My own family, my children and grandchildren, were sitting here in my house telling me to accept my husband's infidelity as a matter of practicality. They had completely sided with him. They had chosen his wants over my dignity. In that moment, I had never felt so absolutely alone, so utterly betrayed. I felt like an old piece of furniture, something they kept for sentimental reasons, but no longer served a useful purpose. I stood up, my legs shaking. "I see," he said, my voice flat. "The majority rules. He'll get what he wants." I turned to walk out of the room, to escape their pitying and judgmental stares. As I reached the door, George called my name. "Eleanor?" For a foolish, hopeful second, I thought he might reconsider, that he might see the monstrous thing he had done. I turned back. He looked at me, his face serious. "Can I tell Tiffany you were joking about calling the police? It really freaked her out." The last piece of my heart shattered. I didn't answer. I simply walked out of the room, out the back door, and into the garden. A few minutes later, I heard cheers from the living room. I looked through the window and saw them. My family were hugging George, patting him on the back. They were celebrating his victory, celebrating the successful negotiation of my surrender. And through the window, I could see my husband, my partner of 40 years, already pulling out his phone, a smile spreading across his face as he called his mistress with the good news. After that day, the 4th of July, a terrible new normalcy settled into our house. It was the quiet, polite hell of a marriage that was dead, but not yet buried. The affair was no longer a secret to hide, but a fact to manage. George made no effort to be discreet. I knew that every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, while I was at my aquatic therapy appointments, Tiffany came over. I knew because I could smell her perfume lingering in the air when I got home. I started finding long blonde hairs on the sofa cushions. Once, I even found an earring, a cheap, glittering thing tucked into the side of his armchair. I picked it up with 2 fingers, looked at it for a long moment, and then dropped it in the trash. What was there to say? I had been outvoted. The family treated the situation with a chilling sense of normalcy. When they called, they asked, "How are you and Dad doing?" As if nothing had changed. Bethany, in particular, seemed to think she had engineered a brilliant compromise. One afternoon, she stopped by with some groceries for me. As I put them away, she said in a bright, cheerful voice, "You know, Mum, I'm really proud of you." I stopped what I was doing and stared at her. "Proud of me? Why?" "For being so understanding," she said, completely serious. "For putting Dad's happiness first. It shows how much you love him. Letting him do this. Letting him." The word hung in the air between us, as if I had given my permission. As if it were a generous gift I had bestowed rather than a betrayal that was tearing me apart day by day. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my chest. "Bethany," I said, my voice low and steady, "this is the last time we will speak of this. The very last. Do you understand?" She was taken aback by my tone, but she nodded. "Sure, Mum. I get it. It's hard to forget if people keep bringing it up." She had no idea. She thought my problem was a matter of forgetting, not a wound that was festering at the core of our family. I began to isolate myself, not just from George, but from everyone. I became an observer of my own life. I cooked, I cleaned, I went to my appointments. I built a wall around myself, painful brick by painful brick. On weekends, George was home. We ate dinner together, talking about meaningless things, the weather, the news, what the grandkids were doing. He would try to be affectionate sometimes, a hand on my shoulder, a compliment about the food. It was all an act, a way to soothe his own conscience. I rarely reciprocated. The well of affection I once had for him had run dry. To cope, I started spending entire days away from home, especially on Saturdays. I told George I had joined a new art class or was volunteering at the hospital. In reality, I simply drove. I drove for hours with no destination in mind. I would find a quiet diner in a small town I'd never seen before and sit for hours with a cup of coffee, just watching people live their ordinary lives. I would go to the movies and watch film after film, losing myself in other people's stories, because mine had become unbearable. These long absences didn't seem to bother George. In fact, he seemed to prefer it. It gave him an empty house, a clear schedule. I knew what was happening while I was gone. The house was his, the bed was his, and Tiffany was with him. The thought was a dull, constant ache, but something strange began to happen during those long, lonely car rides. The pain slowly began to coalesce into something else. Something colder, sharper. It was resolve. I realized everyone saw me as a frail, weak older woman who had no choice but to accept her fate. They thought my silence was surrender. They were wrong. My silence was my planning. My silence was my biding my time. My silence was my preparation for war. The months dragged on. The vibrant colors of autumn faded into the cold gray of winter. Our house, once filled with the warmth of a long life shared, now felt like a cold, empty museum. George and I were polite strangers, coexisting in a space that no longer felt like a home. He had his life, which I now knew included not just Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, but dinners and outings with Tiffany. My life consisted of my appointments, my solitary car trips, and my secret planning. My lawyer, a shrewd woman named Miss Albright, had been very clear. "Eleanor," she had said, "we need to be meticulous. We document everything. We move slowly and quietly too." So I did. I started gathering bank statements, deeds, and investment portfolio reports. George had always managed the finances, but I was a quick study. I spent hours at the library learning about asset division and divorce law. The quiet librarian was becoming a financial strategist. Spring arrived, and with it, Mother's Day. For years, we had a family tradition. The children would take me to a fancy brunch at a beautiful downtown French restaurant. By mutual agreement, George didn't come to my Mother's Day brunch, and I didn't go to his Father's Day celebration. It was the children's day with each parent, and it had always worked for us. This year, however, a dark suspicion took root in my mind. Given what had happened on the 4th of July, I couldn't shake the feeling that George would view my absence as an opportunity. The day before Mother's Day, Bethany called to confirm. "We'll pick you up at 11, Mum. So excited." She chirped. "Actually, honey," I said, forcing a weak, hesitant tone into my voice, "I don't think I'm up for it this year. My arthritis is killing me. You guys go and have a wonderful time without me. Just call me later." There was a pause. "Oh, okay, Mum," Bethany said a little too quickly. "If you're sure, we'll miss you." I knew she was lying. My absence wasn't a disappointment. It was a convenience. On Mother's Day morning, I watched from my bedroom window as Bethany's minivan arrived, followed by Charles and Iris's car. They all went inside to collect George. A few minutes later, they all emerged, laughing and piling into the cars, heading toward the restaurant. I truly wonder if you were in my place. What would you do? Would you choose to be quiet to maintain peace, or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light the way for someone else. I waited 20 minutes, then got into my own car. I didn't get dressed up. I just wore simple slacks and a blouse. I drove to the French restaurant. I wasn't planning on going in. I just needed to know. I parked across the street where I had a clear view of the entrance and the parking lot. I watched my family arrive. I saw my son Charles open the door for my daughter, Bethany. I saw my husband George laughing, looking happier than I had seen him in years. And then another car pulled into the parking lot. A small, sporty red convertible. My breath hitched. Tiffany stepped out of the car, wearing a pretty floral dress. She walked up to my family, and my daughter Bethany gave her a hug, a warm, welcoming hug. My son-in-law Frank smiled and nodded. My husband George wrapped his arm around her waist and kissed her on the cheek. And then, all together, my entire family, with my husband's mistress in tow, walked into the restaurant to celebrate Mother's Day without me. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The pain in my joints was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. But this pain was different. It wasn't the gut-wrenching grief I felt when I first discovered the affair. It wasn't the humiliated despair I felt during the family intervention. It was a cold, clarifying rage. This was the final betrayal. This was them, all of them, erasing me. They hadn't just replaced me in my husband's bed. They were replacing me at the family table. Any shred of doubt that remained, any thought that perhaps this could be fixed, that my family could be saved, vanished in that moment. It was over. I didn't cry, I simply put the car in gear and drove away. I didn't go to a diner or a movie theater. I went straight home. I walked into my study and called Miss Albright. "It's time," I said, when she answered. "We're moving forward with the final plan." The year that followed that Mother's Day was the strangest of my life. On the surface, I was the picture of quiet resignation. I became even more compliant, more docile. I stopped my weekend car trips. I started asking George about his day, feigning interest in his tennis matches and his card games. I played the role of the devoted, albeit distant, wife. Everyone believed it. They viewed my change in behavior as final acceptance, the last stage of my surrender. My daughter Bethany even commented on it during a phone call. "It's so good to hear you sound like your old self again, Mom," she had said. They had no idea that my old self was gone forever, replaced by a woman they didn't know at all. My submission was a smokescreen. Behind it, I worked with a methodical, silent fury. My life became a series of secret appointments and covert operations. Every 2 weeks, I would tell George I was going to a new aquatic therapy class for my arthritis. Instead, I drove to Miss Albright's downtown office. We spent hours going through 40 years of financial records. George had been clever. Many of our most valuable assets, our investment portfolios and retirement funds, were structured in a way that gave him primary control. "He's counting on you not knowing how to touch this," Ms. Albright said, tapping a thick file. "He is underestimating you. We'll use that." We began the painstaking process of untangling our financial lives. On Miss Albright's advice, I opened a new bank account in my name at a different bank. We began drafting the legal paperwork to liquidate certain joint assets, documents that would require George's signature. I would slip them into a pile of ordinary household bills and tax papers. "Just routine paperwork from our financial advisor, honey," I'd say casually. He would scribble his signature without a second look. They go, too engrossed in the football game on TV to care. Each signature was a small victory, another brick in the foundation of my new life. During this time, I also did something for myself. I reconnected with an old friend, a bar named Arthur. We had worked together years ago, before I retired from the library. He was the library director, a kind, gentle man with a quick wit and a deep love of literature. His wife had passed away from cancer a few years prior, and I knew he had been lonely. I found his number and called him on an impulse at first, just to hear a friendly voice. We started meeting for coffee. It was innocent. We talked about books, our former colleagues, our children. For the first time in years, I felt seen. I wasn't an ailing wife or a problem to be managed. I was just Eleanor. Arthur listened. When I finally found the courage to tell him what was happening in my marriage, he offered no platitudes or judgment. He simply listened. His eyes filled with a deep, compassionate sadness. He reached across the table and took my hand, his touch gentle, and said, "You deserve so much more." Our friendship deepened. He became my confidant, my only source of sanity in a world that had gone mad. He was the only one who knew about my plan. He didn't question it. He supported it. He saw my strength when everyone else saw only my weakness. As the months passed, my plan took its final shape. I had a new bank account with a substantial sum of money. I had a lawyer ready to file the divorce papers at a moment's notice. And I had a friend in Arthur who offered me not romance, but something far more valuable. A glimpse of a future where I wouldn't be alone, a future where I would be respected. I circled the date on my calendar, the 4th of July. Exactly 1 year from the day my family had sat me down and sentenced me to a life of humiliation. This year would not be their day of celebration. It would be my Independence Day. The morning of the 4th dawned bright and clear. The air was already thick with the smell of cut grass and the distant pop of early firecrackers. Our backyard slowly filled with the same cast of characters as the year before. Bethany and Frank, Charles and Iris, the grandchildren. The grill was fired up, burgers and hot dogs sizzling. The conversation was light, full of laughter. It was a perfect picture of a happy American family, a perfect lie. I played my role to perfection. I mingled, I smiled. I complimented Bethany's potato salad. But this year, I made sure to overplay my weakness. I groaned softly whenever I stood up. I rubbed my hands as if they were in agony. I let out a small sigh of exhaustion every now and then. I was planting the seeds for my final performance. As evening approached, when everyone began getting coolers and beach chairs ready to go watch the town fireworks, I found George in the kitchen. "Honey," I said, placing a hand on his arm, my voice laden with manufactured weariness. "I don't think I can make it to the fireworks this year. My joints are killing me. I think I need to turn in and rest early." He looked at me with a flash of what I could have sworn was genuine concern. That was the hardest part of all this, knowing that somewhere, buried deep beneath the selfishness and betrayal, was the man I once loved, a man who could still feel a flicker of affection for me. It made what I was about to do even harder, but no less necessary. "Are you sure, Eleanor?" he asked. "You missed them last year too." "I'm sure," Zed, giving him a weak smile. "Getting old, I suppose. You guys go and have a wonderful time for me." He patted my hand. "Okay, if you're sure. Get some rest." As soon as he left the room, I watched him go straight to Bethany. A whispered conversation, a quick nod. I knew exactly what was happening. My absence wasn't a problem. It was an invitation. They were making room for Tiffany. The fresh betrayal, though expected, still stung. One by one, they came to say goodbye, expressing their disappointment that I wouldn't be going. I hugged my granddaughters, Julie and Caroline, a little longer than usual. "Be good, my sweet girls," I whispered, my heart aching. This was the only true loss, the only collateral damage of my war that I knew would leave a permanent scar. I stood at the front door and waved as they piled into Bethany's minivan, their laughter drifting back to me on the warm evening breeze. They didn't even look back. The moment the taillights disappeared around the corner, I moved. There was no time for doubt. My luggage, a single suitcase, was already packed and hidden in the back of my closet. I walked through the house one last time. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing but a quiet, resolved calm. In the bedroom, I removed my wedding ring, the simple gold band I had worn for 40 years. I placed it gently on George's pillow. Beside it, I placed a small, discreet USB drive. I grabbed my purse and my suitcase. I went out to the garage and got into my car. I didn't look at the house in the rearview mirror. I was already looking forward. A few streets away, parked on a quiet side road, Arthur was waiting for me in his car. I pulled up behind him, got out, and put my suitcase in his trunk. I left my own car there, legally parked on the street. They would find it eventually. I slid into the passenger seat of his car, and he leaned over and took my hand. "Ready?" he asked, his voice soft. "I'm ready," I said. And together, we drove toward the airport, toward the rest of my life, as the first bursts of the fireworks began to light up the night sky behind us. The family returned home late, around 10:30 p.m. I imagine they were high on the fireworks, still buzzing from the festive cheer. George probably opened the door expecting to find the house dark and me asleep in bed. It was Charles who found it. I knew this later from Iris. George had asked him to go check on me, to make sure I was okay. Charles walked into the master bedroom. He didn't find me. He found an empty, perfectly made bed, and on his father's pillow, gleaming under the soft light of the bedside lamp, were two small objects: my wedding ring and a black USB drive. A sense of unease must have run through them. This wasn't right. This wasn't part of the plan. They all gathered in the living room, a confused, anxious group. Frank, being the most tech-savvy, grabbed the USB drive and plugged it into his laptop. A single video file popped up on the screen. He double-clicked. The screen was black for a moment, and then my face appeared. I was in a room they didn't recognize, sitting in a comfortable chair. I looked calm. I was staring directly into the camera, as if looking into each of their eyes. "Hello, everyone," I began, my voice clear and steady. "If I've calculated correctly, you are watching this a little after 10 p.m., right after getting back from the fireworks." I watched them in my mind reflexively check the clock. "At this very moment," I continued, "I'm on a plane, flying far away, and in case you're wondering, I'm not coming back." The sound of George's gasp, a sharp, choked "No," was something I could only imagine. But I knew it was that, "You betrayed me," the woman on the screen said. The new me, her voice unwavering. "Every single one of you. George, my husband of 40 years, a man for whom I built a home, raised a family, and supported through everything. You threw me away like an old dish rag for a woman half my age. And when I dared to object, you turned my own children against me. I thought 40 years of loyalty, dedication, and fidelity would mean something to you. I deserved better than this. Your wants, and let's be honest, they were whims, not needs, should never have overridden my dignity." I let the words hang in the air for a moment before turning my attention to my children. "Bethany, your betrayal hurt just as much as your father's. You were always my mother's girl. We did everything together. And to know that you not only supported your father in cheating on me, but actively encouraged it, that you lectured him and me on how to accept it. That broke my heart in a way his actions never could. I could imagine her shaking her head. But the truth was right there on the screen for her husband to see. And Charles, you must be one of the most foolish men in the world. Did you realize that by supporting this, you gave your wife, Iris, permission to do the same to you? You told her with your actions that if she ever feels her needs aren't met, she has the green light to seek satisfaction elsewhere. How does that feel, son? I saw Frank looking at Bethany, a new, terrible suspicion dawning in his eyes. I saw Iris looking at Charles, her face pale. I wasn't just leaving. I was planting seeds of doubt that would grow in the poisoned soil of their betrayal. The family they fought so hard to keep together was already beginning to unravel. The video continued, the on-screen me pausing to let the weight of my words sink in. The atmosphere in that living room must have been dense, filled with shock and dawning horror. But I wasn't finished. The emotional blows were just the prelude to the main event. I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was disrespected weekly, I said, my voice turning colder, more businesslike. And I certainly wasn't going to stay when I found out it was happening multiple times a week. Oh yes, George, you weren't as discreet as you thought. Inviting her to Mother's Day. That was especially poor taste. I should also mention the financial situation I have left you with. For 40 years, I put this family first. I managed the household, I raised the children, and I supported George's career, allowing him to accumulate our wealth. I have decided it is time I was compensated for my contributions. I leaned forward slightly. George, I have left you the house. As you know, it is fully paid for and of considerable value. My lawyer, Miss Albright, will be in touch to help you with the sale if you choose to do so. I have also left you $400,000 in the checking account. I calculated that comes out to $10,000 for every good year you gave me. Unfortunately, there haven't been many good years lately. I let that sink in. A generous settlement by any standard, but it was what came next that would change everything for them. As for the rest of our assets, I said, my voice dropping slightly, our investment portfolios, our retirement funds, our savings, I took them. With the help of my attorney, I have secured my half of the marital property, and then some as compensation for the emotional damage and breach of trust. After everything is settled, I will have a portfolio nearing 8 figures. I will be perfectly fine, though I doubt any of you genuinely care. The silence in the room must have been absolute. The money, the foundation of their comfortable lives, the source of their security, the future inheritance they all took for granted, had vanished. Oh, I added, a small knowing smile playing on my lips. And if you're worried about me spending my golden years alone, don't be. I already have company, and he's sitting right next to me on this plane. Arthur, would you like to say hello? A man's face came into the frame. It was Arthur. He looked distinguished and kind, with warm eyes. He smiled gently at the camera. Hello, he said, his voice calm and pleasant. I'm Arthur. I'll be helping Eleanor spend what could have been your inheritance. He gave a small wave. I turned back to the camera. George, you probably don't remember Arthur, but you've seen him several times at library events. We worked together for over 20 years. He retired early to join me in my new home. We have been close friends all this time, and we've kept each other company over the past few months since I told him what my husband was doing. And the best part? Arthur's needs are simple. Just affection, respect, and good conversation. I'm looking forward to it. I looked directly into the camera one last time, my gaze holding George's through the screen. I loved you, George. I loved you from the day we met. I longed to grow old with you. I am so disappointed that your physical wants ruined that, for us, for me. For your sake, I hope she was worth it. Goodbye. And the screen went black. That was the moment. The moment the screen went black. And I knew that in that living room, miles away, my old life had officially ended. My new life, sitting on that plane next to a good man, had just begun. If you're still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting the number 1 down below. It lets me know you've supported me and tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a tremendous encouragement and gives me the strength to continue. Please comment the number 1 and listen to what happened next. The weeks that followed my departure were, as I later learned from Iris, pure chaos. The video had detonated like a bomb in the middle of their comfortable lives, and the fallout was devastating. George, stripped of his wife and most of his fortune in a single blow, crumbled. He was a man adrift, lost in a sea of his own making. He called my phone incessantly for days, leaving dozens of voicemails that swung wildly between rage, disbelief, and pathetic pleas for forgiveness. I never listened to them. Arthur deleted them for me. The biggest explosion, however, occurred in my daughter Bethany's marriage. My words in the video had been a direct hit on the fragile trust between her and Frank. He couldn't look at her without seeing his mother-in-law's warning. You gave him a free pass. The accusation hung between them, poisoning the air in their home. They argued constantly. Frank grew suspicious and withdrawn. Bethany, confronted with the potential loss of her own marriage, panicked. The practical solution she had so confidently prescribed for my marriage suddenly didn't seem so practical anymore. Charles and Iris were quieter, but the damage was there too. Iris, who had always been the most reluctant of the group, distanced herself from the family. She was pregnant with their first child, my first grandson, and she didn't want any part of that toxicity. She told Charles that until he could understand the profound disrespect they had shown me, she needed space. They were all fractured, broken pieces of a family that had once been whole. They had sacrificed my dignity on the altar of George's wants, and now they were paying the price. Tell me whether you have parents, grandparents, or older family members who deserve more respect than they currently receive from their families. Alternatively, tell me if you yourself are going through a situation in which you're not appreciated as much as you truly deserve. About 3 weeks after I left, I decided to make one call. I didn't call Bethany or Charles. I called Iris. I knew she was the only one who might have a shred of conscience. She answered on the first ring, her voice cautious. Hello, Iris. It's Eleanor, I said softly. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Oh, Eleanor. My God, how are you? Where are you? I'm fine, honey. I'm safe, and I'm well. But I can't tell you where I am right now. How are you? I'm okay, she said, her voice wavering. Dad, George is not doing well, and Bethany and Frank are having serious problems. She paused. Eleanor, I have to tell you, I am so sorry. I knew it was wrong from the start. I should have said something. I was new to the family. I was afraid. It's no excuse, but I am truly sorry till Iris, I said, and I meant it. I saw it in your eyes that day. You are forgiven. She began to cry softly. Thank you. That means so much. Especially since, well, because I want both grandmothers in my baby's life. I'm pregnant, Eleanor. The news was a ray of sunshine cutting through the storm clouds. A baby. A new beginning. Oh, darling, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. What wonderful news. Congratulations. We talked for a while longer. She told me more about the aftermath, the arguments and the tears. Before hanging up, I made one request. Iris, I said, I think I'm ready to talk to them. To everyone. Can you arrange a call for tomorrow night, but with one condition? Tiffany must not be there. Of course, Eleanor, she said without hesitation. They'll be there. The next evening, I sat with Arthur in the living room of our new home. A small, beautiful house overlooking the ocean. The phone was on speaker. The call connected to the living room where my former family was gathered. Hello, Mom. We're all here. Iris's voice came across, a little shaky. Thank you, Iris, I said calmly. Just so you all know, Arthur is with me. I want this to be a civilized conversation, not an argument. Do you all agree? A chorus of murmured agreements came through the speaker. Good, I began. I wanted to wait until some time had passed before we spoke. I paused, then addressed my son. Charles, congratulations on the baby. I mean that sincerely. Thank you, Mom. His voice was subdued. I'm going to try to be the kind of father you taught me to be. The best thing you can do for your children is love their mother, I said softly. Remember that. Then it was George's turn. Eleanor, darling, please, he started, his voice broken. Please come back. We can fix this. I'll end it with Tiffany, I swear. If you had only told me you were really going to leave. I did tell you, George. I cut in, my voice firm but not cruel. I told you I wouldn't accept this, but you didn't listen. You chose your affair over our marriage. You invited her into our family. There is no fixing this. From the moment you chose her over me, our marriage was over. I am sorry, but it's done. I could hear him beginning to sob, a broken, helpless sound. And your commitment to me, he managed to say. You made that commitment first. Yes, I did, I replied. And I would still be honoring it had you not broken yours. When you did, you released me from my commitment and gave me the opportunity to make a new one I have made with Arthur. There is no turning back. A heavy silence fell, broken only by George's weeping. Then Bethany spoke, her voice cold with anger. How nice, Mom. You called just to hurt Dad more. All because your ego couldn't handle another woman making him feel good. Do you truly see it that way, Bethany? I asked calmly. Let me ask your husband a question. Frank, how is your ego? Is it ready to accept another man making your wife feel better than you do? Silence. The question hung in the air like a guillotine. Finally, Frank's voice, tight and strained, came through the speaker. For the record, Eleanor, after all this, Bethany and I have been having very serious problems. I understand, I replied, but let me tell you both this. Fight for your marriage. You love each other, but you started taking it for granted. Let this be a wake-up call, not the end. Remember, you are a team. Be honest with him. That's all you can do. I never meant for this to happen, Mom, Bethany whispered. Her anger gone, replaced by the terrified voice of a small girl. I'm scared. I know, I said softly. But you can fix it. Spend the time you used managing my marriage, managing yours. You're his partner, Bethany, not his boss. Be honest with him. That's all you can do. There was another long silence. The call had reached its conclusion. The things that needed to be said had been said. It's too late for us, honey, I said, my voice gentle. A final farewell to my daughter. But it's not too late for you. I let Arthur disconnect the call. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the large window at the ocean, the waves ebbing and flowing, constant and eternal. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. One chapter of my life, a long and painful one, was finally truly over. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. I felt peace. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but it was important. If you've ever gone through something similar, or if my journey has touched you in any way, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Reading your stories and knowing I'm not alone means a great deal to me. Please take care, and know that no matter how dark things get, there is always a new dawn waiting. Goodbye for now.